Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, where the rabbis at Congregation Avas Torah each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the parsha and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Chaim Pupko, and I am joined by my dear friends and teammates, Rabbi Daniel Goldberg,
Shalom,
and Rabbi Morty Kisus.
Shalom.
If you'd like to sponsor an upcoming episode, please contact the shul. All right, here we go. Our pasuk for this week, Parshas Ki Teitzei, comes from Devarim, chapter 22, verse 1, Perek Beis, pasuk Aleph, which contains the mitzvah to return lost items. Lo sire es shor achicha, o es seyo nidachim, v'salamta mehem. If you see your fellow's ox or sheep wandering around, do not ignore it. Hashev tishivem le'achicha, you must return it back to your peer. Now, I just want to share before we dive in that the very first Gemara that I learned as a kid was about this mitzvah. Maseches Bav Metzia, the second Perek Elu Mitzios. It's one of those foundational areas of Gemara that many children are taught when introducing them to the world of Gemara learning. It's one of those topics, one of those Gemaras that reflects some of the basic features and style of the Gemara. It's a great introduction to Talmudic legal theory, how the Gemara thinks. And so I'm curious, what Gemara did you guys learn first?
I was the same. Elu Mitziot.
Look at that.
I remember learning brachos.
That's actually a very, also, I think these are the two most common. Elu Mitziot is one, and Berachot, when I used to teach at Mariah, the introductory course to the Gemara was always the fourth chapter of Masechet Berachot. It's easy, it's digestible, it's informative, it's relevant. But I'm with Rabbi Pupko on this one. Elu Mitziot was my very first, and actually, Moshe is learning it this year, so I'm right back in the sugya, by the way.
Wow.
Ask me anything you need.
Beautiful. All right. Who's kicking off?
The pasuk has a kind of a double language, an interesting double language of Hashev tishivem, you shall surely return the lost object to your brother. And the Gemara in Baba Metzia, which is cited here by the Ramban, says, Afilu mea pe'amim, even 100 times. Even if your neighbor, their sheep wanders out of their home, and you, the first time, okay, you go and you bring it back. And then it happens the next day, and the next day, and the next day. You have to keep your chayav, you're obligated to return their animal, their lost object to them. And to me, that's an incredibly difficult obligation. I mean, if that was my situation and my neighbors just kept, couldn't get their act together, I might return it once or twice. And then I would say, look, it's not my job to build a fence or take responsibility. They'll never learn if I keep doing this for them. And the fact that there's this obligation to keep doing it is really a reflection of the fact that we have to take the high road, commit ourselves to doing really hard things, even when, people aren't necessarily even kind of living up to, let's say, kind of deserving the chesed. And I thought that it's also such a beautiful mashal because it's ultimately we're talking about Hashev Teshivim. It's kind of like tshuva. Like every year we come back to Hashem and we're like, we lost it again. I'm sorry, like it's another, I lost it. I know I keep coming back to you, but can you help me kind of get it back? Can you help me bring my lost sheep back? And it's like Hashem has afilu mea pe'amim, like adio moso techakelo. Hashem will continue to help us get it back every year, give it back to us, restore us in a certain way, even though we're not really deserving. It's like that neighbor knocks on your door again. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I know I let it out. I know I let Betsy out again. It's like you have to keep doing it. So I thought there was different layers there. What
you're describing to me sounds like unconditional love. If you have unconditional love, then there are no conditions. You keep coming back. No problem, right? If you're that kind of neighbor and you feel that kind of unconditional love, which we should have to an extent, then that's how you treat them. And the same thing for the Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Right. But I mean, I would say as a parent, there's also sometimes tough love where you're just like, look, if I keep doing this for them, they'll never learn. And it's almost like a person has to find those boundaries and those borders in life and how you navigate that. But at the same time, Hashem's just saying just keep doing it for them. It's not your job to teach them. Your job is to help them.
On a more serious note, it reminds me of a movie I saw in the last few years. I think it was called Beautiful Boy or A Beautiful Boy. And it was about two parents struggling with their child and his addiction and the very difficult things that they had to do. and it really tests the limits of tough love. That's the idea. You're right.
I wanted to share a extraordinarily novel reading of this pasuk. The very first, obviously we all look around, we check Rashi, we find something that speaks to us. But I looked at the Or HaChaim HaKadosh again. I mean, I feel for me like the Or HaChaim HaKadosh is what the Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch is for you. Rabbi Pupka is pretty colorful just in terms of his sourcing. He's got a little bit of everything. So Rabbi Goldberg and I have been pretty consistent with where we look first. But nonetheless, he has an unbelievably novel reading of this pasuk. And he says that Lo tir'eh et shor achicha o et seo is actually referring to achicha is God. And we are not to look at the people that are being led by their animalistic side, so to speak, and just ignore them. So lo tir'eh et shor achicha o et seo is actually referring to God's children, members of the Jewish people that have followed their human side, their physical side, and we are not to look at them nidachim, stumbling, walking around lost, unaffiliated, clueless as to the beauty of this religion, and then just completely ignore them. Rather, hashev tishivem la'achicha. We are obligated to involve ourselves in their process of spiritual growth. Now, he says, first of all, the term achicha is mighty flattering. Here, Hashem's calling us his brother.
Right.
And the reason is because we're willing to take responsibility for his children. And if we walk around and find somebody that's uninitiated or someone that's just a little bit lost, and we show them the beauty, and it's so careful to read this pasuk as the Or HaChaim HaKadosh does. You highlighted, Rabbi Goldberg, Hashev Tishivem, the double language. He says, Hashev, first show them the beauty of what we have. Bring them back to our place, and then naturally, Teshivem, they'll return on their own. When we expose to them the beauty of Yahadut, the privilege that we have living a life of Torah and mitzvot, automatically they're going to be Teshivem la'achicha. They're going to go back to God himself. And therefore, it says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, we each have a responsibility. It's a tochacha, it's a rebuke to us as members who have been exposed to the beauty of religion, to the exemplary privilege that we have to live lives of Torah and mitzvot, is to not just say, you know what, I'm lucky I live this life. But if you meet somebody in the street and the person so happens to be Jewish, engage them in conversation. Literally just this week, somebody asked me a question from the Bible. And he asked me something, and I was able to tell him basically a Rashi that brings down a Midrash, and he was so enlightened by it. And I felt like I had the privilege of exposing him to the emet and the beauty of Torah. He was able to see in an instant, wow, that makes so much sense. And to him, I saw a light bulb go off in his eyes. And hopefully that inspires him to search more and get more involved and find his way. But ultimately, this is a conversation to us. And Hashem is bestowing this very lofty title, Achicha, on us, almost putting us as a partner in the process, because we are people that are not going to be v'het alamta. We're not going to ignore our brothers and sisters that are lost or that don't necessarily have the direction they need, but rather Hashev, we're going to show them the beauty of our lifestyle, and then naturally teshivem la'achicha, they're going to immediately return themselves to Borei Olam.
It's so beautiful because it basically paints what we might call colloquially kiruv as hashavas aveda to Hashem. That's literally what the Or HaChaim is saying. We all naturally belong to God, and sometimes we wander off, and Hashem, and we have the ability to return something, a possession, back to Hashem, and bring our brothers and sisters back in some smaller or large way. It's very, very powerful.
So this segues beautifully into what I wanted to talk about, because one may say that this approach of the Or HaChaim it's like a little bit like a Hasidic Shavor, right? It's reading the pasuk in a way that's not intuitive. I will show you why it's pshat in the pasuk.
You did that last time also, Rabbi.
Yes.
I'm impressed.
Yes, I did. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, because when we go out on a limb to say a Hasidic word, first of all, it's the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, so I didn't feel terrible, but the first thing that came to my mind was literally saying, oh, this is like a Hasidic reading of the pasuk. But go ahead. Let's
Here we go.
Bring it back to pshat. I love this.
First of all, we have to understand is Hashavas Aveda is a very Jewish mitzvah. It is uniquely Jewish. Because if you look at many legal systems from the ancient Near East to today, they all have a concept of returning lost items and the obligations a person has, but there's virtually no legal system that obligates a person to pick it up in the first place, to make an effort to take possession of this lost item and then return it. The laws you'll find in other systems are all about what do you do with a lost object that you have in your possession. But none of them say, go pick it up. Only the Torah has this double mitzvah of do not ignore it and make sure to return it. You have to go actively pick it up. According to those other systems, you could very well just ignore it and you have no obligations. And naturally, the reason is because the Torah wants to instill within us a sense of empathy and responsibility. It's not enough just to serve the Ribono Shel Olam within our Dalet Amos. No, we have to go outside of our Dalet Amos, and we have to be concerned for others. We have to go out of our way to be concerned for others. But what's fascinating is that the rabbis take this mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda and they extend it to other spheres that don't necessarily have to do with lost objects. So the Gemara says that one of the sources for our obligation to heal the sick is Hashavas Aveda, to return them to their health. If a person's lost, giving that person directions is Hashavas Aveda. If a person is in danger, to save them, the Gemara says, oh, isn't it lo samar al damarecha? Gemara concludes basically, no, it's Hashavas Aveda to save a person's life. And another example, Rav Asher Weiss has a shir on this, and he brings like 9 different examples. Another example he cites is the idea of returning a person's neshama to themselves. Essentially, kiruv rechokim, teaching people Torah. Teaching people Torah to restore a sense of identity is Hashavas Aveda. So Rabbi Goldberg, you identified it as returning the person to God. I would say it's returning the person to themselves. Both are true. But the reason I picked this pasuk is because there wasn't a standout pasuk in this parsha because it's just filled with so many mitzvos. There wasn't a standout foundational pasuk. But Hashavas Aveda as a mitzvah really carries this foundational principle. And I have to throw in, of course, one of the other ways in which you see that it's a uniquely Jewish thing and it doesn't apply to other systems of law, you know the Seinfeld finale?
Sure.
You know the topic of the Seinfeld finale?
Innocent bystander.
The Good Samaritan law, the innocent bystander, and how the friends on Seinfeld were taken to court because they didn't go out of their way to help. But if you actually look at the Good Samaritan law in the United States, it's not that. It's not that you have to go out of your way to help someone. The Good Samaritan law is to protect you from being sued if you do damage while trying to be a Good Samaritan. It's not that you have to. There is no Good Samaritan law that says you have to go save someone. It's just a protection from legal liability if you do. The Torah's obligation, you got to go out of your way.
It's interesting. When the Torah first presents this mitzvah in Mishpatim, it says when you encounter, ki sifka. And here it says ki sir'eh, when you see it. So the Gemara says, well, if we only had one, when you encounter it, you might think that if I bump into this item or animal, then I'm obligated to return it, but not if I see it from a far distance, then I wouldn't have to go. And then if I only had, when I see it from a far distance, but not sifka, I might have thought that I have to go even if I see it miles and miles away. I'm on the top of a mountain, I see a lost object, an animal, I have to go all the way out. And so the two things kind of counterbalance each other. And so we say, look, even if you see it, but it's not right next to you, you should go and return it. But if you see it and it's really, really far away, then you're not obligated to go and return it. Okay, but then the Gemara says, but you really should go lifnim mishur sadin. And even if it's pretty far, it's pretty out of your way, you should still, even if you're not technically obligated, you should go lifnim mishur sadin. You should go above and beyond to try and return it. Exactly. So I think that kind of situates itself next to what you're saying, which is this. Right? It's almost like imposed on top of what you're saying. Not only does the Torah require you to not turn a blind eye, but even going a little bit above and beyond to go literally that extra mile to do this. We want you to go that extra mile. That's kind of what this is all about. Which is how we should feel towards our brothers and sisters in general. It is a very beautiful foundational mitzvah indeed, Rabbi. You picked a good one this week. Thank you.
Well done.
Shkoyach. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in sponsoring a future episode, please reach out to one of us. And of course, please send us your feedback. Shabbat Shalom and Good Shabbos from the One Pasuk Podcast.